A female mechanic repairs a Hells Angels motorcycle and gets fired. What happens next will shock everyone. Grab your tools and get out of my workshop right now. Fernando's shout echoed throughout the garage, causing even the customers at the reception desk to look out the glass window. You're fired for insubordination and putting our customers at risk. Camila stood motionless in the center of the workshop, 24 years old and with 6 years of experience as a mechanic, still holding the wrench she had used to repair the Harley-Davidson of the biker who had just left. Around her, 5 male colleagues lowered their eyes, pretending to be busy with their own work. The silence was deafening, broken only by the hum of the machines in the background. Fernando, I just helped a desperate father get to the hospital to see his daughter, Camila said, her calm voice contrasting with the manager's hysterical tone. Any decent person would have done the same thing. Any decent person would have followed protocol. Fernando pointed his finger at her, his face red with anger. That tattooed bum could have stolen, assaulted someone, or worse. And you, without authorization, decide to play social heroine. What Fernando didn't know was that Camila had grown up being judged in exactly the same way as that motorcyclist. The daughter of a cleaning lady and a security guard, she knew firsthand the weight of prejudiced looks, denied opportunities, and fake smiles that had contempt. For years, she had been the only black woman in workshops dominated by white men who questioned her competence with every screw she tightened. 3 hours earlier, when the man in the leather jacket rushed into the workshop, begging for help to fix his motorcycle that had broken down on the corner, all the other mechanics simply turned their backs. We don't serve bikers here, Fernando had said without even looking at the man. You can look somewhere else. Ricardo, the senior mechanic, had made sure to whisper loudly enough to be heard. These guys are trouble. Better not get involved. The others nodded in agreement, as if they had made a collective decision to completely ignore the despair written all over the father's face. But Camila saw something the others refused to see. A desperate father with tears in his eyes, explaining that his 8-year-old daughter was in intensive care after an accident, and that the motorcycle was his only means of transportation. His hands trembled as he showed her a photo on his cell phone of a smiling little girl in a hospital bed. Please, he begged, his voice breaking. It's just a problem with the ignition. Any mechanic can fix it in 15 minutes. My little girl is alone and scared. While Fernando was attending to a customer in the office, discussing the prices of imported parts with his usual arrogance, Camila discreetly signaled to the motorcyclist. She knew she was risking her job, but something inside her simply couldn't stand by and watch that man suffer. In 15 minutes of silent work, she identified and fixed the ignition problem. It was exactly what she had suspected, a loose wire that any experienced mechanic could have fixed effortlessly. The relief on the man's face was immediate and overwhelming. Thank you, the biker had muttered, squeezing her hand tightly. You saved my life today. My name is Daniel, and I'll never forget what you did. He tried to offer her money, but Camila refused with a simple gesture. Just take care of your daughter, she replied. Now facing Fernando's fury, Camila smiled slightly. It wasn't a smile of defeat, but something much more dangerous. The serene expression of someone who had just discovered exactly what kind of person she was fighting. Ferno wasn't angry for reasons of security or protocol. He was angry because she had treated a tattooed biker like a human being. You can be sure I'll never forget this moment either, Fernando, she replied, putting away her tools with deliberate calm. Neither will you, nor anyone else who was here today and kept quiet. Her colleagues avoided her gaze. Rodrigo, who always asked for her help with more complex engines, suddenly became very interested in the tires he was changing. Paolo, who had shared his lunch with her last week, turned his back on her completely. As he walked toward the door, Fernando shouted once more, "And don't dream about getting a recommendation. I'll make sure no decent workshop in town will hire you. You'll learn that there's a hierarchy and respect here." Camila stopped at the door, turned slowly, and looked each man in the eye. There was something in her gaze that made some of them look away, a silent determination that only exists in those who have weathered much worse storms and survived to rewrite their own story. "Fernando," she said, her voice low, but laden with an authority he had never heard before. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career. And the worst part is you don't even know why. If you're following this story of courage and justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happened after this public humiliation would not only transform Camila's life, but reveal secrets that would make Fernando question every decision he had ever made in his career." 3 days after the dismissal, Fernando couldn't stop smiling. He had told the story to at least 10 different people, always emphasizing how he had put that mechanic in her place. During lunch at the restaurant near the workshop, he gestured excitedly to colleagues from other companies. You should have seen her face when I told her I would make sure no one in town would hire her. Fernando laughed, cutting his steak. These people need to understand that charity belongs in church, not in my workshop. Ricardo, who was present during the dismissal, just nodded in agreement, avoiding mentioning that Camila had repaired engines that he himself could not diagnose. Paulo, who had worked side by side with her for 2 years, limited himself to forced laughter, trying to forget how many times she had saved him from embarrassment with customers. Meanwhile, Camila walked through the streets of downtown, visiting repair shop after repair shop. The reaction was always the same, polite smiles that turned into vague excuses as soon as she mentioned where she had worked before. "Oh, you worked at Fernando's shop," said the manager at Autotech, his expression changing immediately. "He called me yesterday. He said you had some attitude problems. Unfortunately, we don't have any openings at the moment. At the 5th shop, they didn't even let her finish speaking. We don't hire people with a history of insubordination," was the curt response she received at the door. Camila always knew this day would come. She grew up watching her mother, Dona Rosa, get fired from 3 different jobs for not fitting the company profile. A fancy euphemism for saying that a black woman questioning unsafe procedures was not welcome. At age 12, Camila had found her mother crying in the kitchen after being accused of theft by a white supervisor who later discovered she had left her purse in the car. "Daughter," Dona Rosa had said that night, drying her tears. "In this world, people like us have to be 3 times better to get half the recognition. But that doesn't mean we should accept injustice silently." It was this lesson that led Camila to specialize in auto mechanics, studying late into the night after working as a general assistant during the day. She knew she would have to prove her worth constantly, but she never imagined that doing the right thing would be punished so cruelly. On Friday, Fernando received a call that made him even more excited. It was James Morrison, owner of a chain of premium repair shops, interested in a business partnership. "I hear you have good control over your team," Morrison said on the other end of the line. "I don't tolerate employees who cause problems or question authority. I need managers who maintain discipline." Fernando sat up straighter in his chair, feeling his ego inflate. "You can count on me, Mr. Morrison. I just solved a problem like that. An employee who thought she could ignore protocols. I showed her who's boss around here. Excellent. Let's set up a meeting for next week." While Fernando mentally celebrated his future promotion, Camila sat in the small apartment she shared with her mother, calmly typing on her laptop. She wasn't looking for a job online. She was doing something very different. For 6 years working for Fernando, she had quietly documented every discriminatory comment, every mistreated customer, every questionable practice she had witnessed. Not out of revenge, but out of caution. Dona Rosa had taught her that people like them always needed evidence when facing injustice. Now methodically organizing screenshots of messages, audio recordings from her cell phone, and detailed notes with dates and witnesses, Camila realized she had something much more powerful in her hands than Fernando could ever imagine. Her phone rang. It was Daniel, the motorcyclist she had helped. "Camila, I heard you were fired for helping me." His voice carried genuine guilt. "This is unacceptable. I want to do something to make it up to you." "Daniel, you don't owe me anything. I did what any decent person would do." "Maybe, but few people would be fired for that." He paused for a moment. "Listen, I need to tell you something about who I really am. Do you have time to talk in person?" Fernando slept peacefully that night, convinced that he had definitively solved the Camila problem. He had no idea that a few miles away, a turnaround was being planned that would turn his life into a public nightmare. Showing that underestimating the intelligence and determination of a woman like Camila would be the biggest mistake he had ever made in his entire career. Each new humiliation Fernando imposed only strengthened something inside Camila that he couldn't see. A silent force fueled by the very injustice he was trying to impose, which would soon reveal itself in a way he could never have predicted. The cafe was almost empty when Camila arrived on Saturday morning. Daniel was already there without his leather jacket, looking like an ordinary businessman in a blue dress shirt. Only the tattoos on his arms betrayed the desperate biker she had helped 3 days earlier. "How's your daughter?" was Camila's first question as she sat down. "Much better, thanks to you." Daniel sighed deeply. "Camila, I need to tell you something that will completely change the situation. My full name is Daniel Morrison. Camila frowned. Morrison as in Morrison Automotive Group? I'm the son of James Morrison, owner of the premium auto repair chain that's negotiating a partnership with Fernando's shop. Daniel paused, seeing the shocked expression on her face. My father doesn't know I ride motorcycles or that I have tattoos. We had a nasty fight ago because of my lifestyle. He cut me off financially, so I've been working as a freelance mechanic. Camila processed the information slowly. So, you're the rebellious son of the most powerful man in the automotive industry in the region. And you saved my daughter. Daniel leaned forward. Camila, my father hates injustice in the workplace. If he knew how you were treated. Meanwhile, Fernando was meticulously preparing for Monday's meeting with James Morrison. He had had the entire workshop cleaned, instructed the employees on how to behave, and even bought a new suit. This partnership would mean advancing his career to a level he had always dreamed of. Ricardo, he called the senior mechanic on Sunday. When Morrison comes tomorrow, make sure everyone is working. I want it to look like we have the most disciplined team in town. What if he asks about employees who recently left? Ricardo hesitated. Tell him we cleaned house, got rid of the problem elements. Fernando smiled with satisfaction. Morrison will love to know that I keep order here. At Camila's house, she and her mother were organizing documents on the kitchen table. Dona Rosa examined the evidence her daughter had collected over 6 years. Screenshots of discriminatory conversations, audio recordings of prejudiced comments, records of customers mistreated because of racial prejudice. Daughter, this is a bombshell. Dona Rosa shook her head, impressed. You have evidence of at least 20 different cases of discrimination. I learned from you, Mom. Always keep evidence. Camila smiled sadly. But now I have something Fernando could never imagine. Daniel had offered more than moral support. As an experienced mechanic and Morrison's son, he knew the industry inside out. Camila, you're more qualified than 90% of the men I've met in this business. My father needs to know that. I don't want pity, Camila said firmly. It's not pity, it's justice and strategy. Daniel smiled. Let me tell you my plan. Monday morning, Fernando arrived 2 hours early, checking every detail. At 10 o'clock, a black Mercedes pulled up in front of the workshop. James Morrison got out. A man in his 60s with impeccable gray hair and the posture of someone who ran a $50 million empire. Mr. Morrison, it's an honor to have you here. Fernando rushed to greet him, almost tripping over his own excitement. Pleased to meet you, Fernando. I've heard interesting things about your management. Morrison shook his hand firmly, observing the environment. Tell me about your leadership philosophy. Discipline above all else, sir. I don't tolerate employees who question authority or cause problems. Just last week, I had to fire a problematic employee who... Oh, really? Morrison raised an eyebrow. What kind of problem? Fernando, excited to have captured the tycoon's attention, began to recount in detail how he had fired Camila for insubordination and risking safety by helping a suspicious motorcyclist. The more he talked, the prouder he became of his firm leadership decision. James Morrison listened silently, but something in his expression was gradually changing. His eyes, previously interested, became cold as ice. Fernando, absorbed in his own narrative, didn't realize that he had just confessed to exactly the kind of behavior Morrison despised most. Interesting, Morrison muttered when Fernando finished. And where might I find this problematic employee? Don't worry about that, Mr. Morrison. I made sure she won't get a job at any decent repair shop in the area. At that moment, across town, Camila received a call that would change everything. It was Daniel. Camila, I just talked to my father. He wants to meet you today at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What Fernando didn't know was that his excitement to impress Morrison had sealed his own fate. Every word of his narrative had been carefully listened to and memorized by the father of the suspicious biker he so despised. While Fernando proudly showed off his facilities, imagining his future promotion, a trap was being set that would turn his biggest professional opportunity into the most humiliating moment of his career, proving that underestimating people can cost much more than just a job. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Camila entered James Morrison's elegant office in the city center. The tycoon greeted her personally, something he never did with lower-level employees. Daniel stood beside his father, now wearing an impeccable suit that revealed his true position in the company. Camila, my son told me what you did for our family, Morrison began, his voice laden with genuine emotion. He also told me how you were treated for it. Mr. Morrison, You saved my granddaughter, and you were fired by a man who 3 hours ago proudly told me how he got rid of a problem employee who helped a suspicious motorcyclist. Morrison smiled coldly. Fernando has no idea who that suspicious motorcyclist is. Meanwhile, at the workshop, Fernando was finishing his meeting with Morrison, convinced that he had secured the partnership of his dreams. I'm sure our values are aligned, Mr. Morrison. Discipline and order have always been my priorities. Without a doubt, Morrison replied, putting away documents. In fact, I'd like to meet this problematic employee you fired. Where can I find her? Fernando laughed, thinking Morrison wanted to use Camila as an example of what not to tolerate. I can give you her address, but I guarantee that after our conversation, no workshop in the area will hire her. Back at the office, Camila showed Morrison and Daniel the arsenal of evidence she had collected over 6 years. Screenshots of discriminatory conversations, audio recordings of prejudiced comments, detailed records of customers mistreated for racial reasons. My God, Morrison muttered, examining the documents. This is a systematic pattern of discrimination. And you documented everything. My mother taught me that people like us always need proof, Camila explained calmly. Fernando thought I was just another mechanic. He didn't know I had a bachelor's degree in business and was studying law at night. Morrison called his chief lawyer immediately. I need you to look into a case of employment discrimination. And I also want you to investigate all of Fernando Silva's practices at his repair shop. 2 hours later, Fernando received a call that changed everything. It was Morrison, but now his voice had lost all its cordiality. Fernando, change of plans. Tomorrow's meeting will be at your shop at 9 o'clock in the morning. And bring all your employees. All of them. Of course, Mr. Morrison. It will be my pleasure. Oh, and Fernando, bring all the hiring and firing records from the last 5 years. I want to personally review your people management. Fernando hung up elated, unaware of the icy tone in Morrison's voice. He spent the rest of the afternoon preparing, ordering all the mechanics to arrive early and be impeccable. The next morning, Morrison arrived accompanied by Daniel, 3 lawyers, a representative from the Ministry of Labor, and to Fernando's complete shock, Camila. Good morning, Fernando, Morrison said, his voice cutting like steel. I'd like to introduce my legal team and my new director of operations, Camila Santos. Fernando turned pale instantly. Mr. Morrison, there must be some mistake. The only mistake here was believing that you would be suitable for a partnership with my company. Morrison walked around the workshop, observing every detail. I've discovered some interesting things about your management. Daniel approached Fernando with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Dad, this is the man who called me a tattooed bum and refused to see me when my daughter was in the hospital. The realization hit Fernando like a punch in the stomach. His legs buckled, and he had to lean on a workbench. I'm Daniel Morrison, son of the man you wanted so badly to do business with, Daniel replied calmly. And I owe my life to the woman you fired for helping me. The representative from the Ministry of Labor approached with a folder full of documents. Mr. Fernando Silva, based on the evidence presented, your workshop is being charged with systematic discriminatory practices. The fines total 300,000 reis. Camila finally spoke, her voice calm, but laden with authority. Fernando, for 6 years, you treated me as if I were inferior. You made jokes about my color, questioned my competence, paid me 20% less than my less qualified male colleagues. She opened a laptop and showed detailed spreadsheets. I documented every incident, every discriminatory comment, every customer you treated differently because of racial prejudice. It's all here, with dates, times, and witnesses. Ricardo and Paolo, who were present during the dismissal, tried to leave discreetly, but one of the lawyers intercepted them. Are important witnesses in this case. You're not going anywhere. Morrison addressed Fernando with visible contempt. Not only have you lost an exceptional employee because of prejudice, you have exposed your true nature to the wrong man at the wrong time. The partnership is canceled. Morrison continued, symbolically tearing up the contracts. And I will personally ensure that every workshop in the region knows exactly what kind of manager you are. Fernando tried to speak, but only incoherent sounds came out of his mouth. His face was white as a sheet, sweat pouring down his forehead. The professional empire he had built was crumbling in a matter of minutes. Camila. Morrison turned to her. Your first decision as the new owner of this shop will be what to do with the former manager. Fernando almost fainted. "Owner, I'm buying this shop," Morrison explained coldly. "And Camila will be responsible for turning it into an example of how a workplace should function." Camila looked at Fernando for a long moment, then addressed the other mechanics who were watching in silence. "You have a choice. You can stay and learn to work in an environment of mutual respect. Or you can follow Fernando's example." As Fernando was escorted out of his own workshop by lawyers, carrying only a box with his personal belongings, Camila realized that this moment symbolized much more than personal justice. It represented a complete transformation of a system that had long protected people like Fernando and punished people like her, proving that sometimes the universe conspires to serve justice in the most poetic way possible. 6 months later, the workshop that had once breathed prejudice had been transformed into a model of excellence and inclusion. Camila hired 3 women mechanics and 2 young black men who had recently graduated from technical courses, creating the diverse environment she had always dreamed of. Productivity increased by 40%, and the customer waiting list was 3 weeks long. "Boss, we just got another 5-star review on Google," announced Roberto, a former colleague who had stayed on the team after formally apologizing to Camila. The customer said they've never been so well served at a repair shop. Paolo, who had also decided to stay, had become one of the most fervent advocates of the new management. "Camila, I need to tell you something," he said during a coffee break. "I've worked here for 5 years, and I've never felt so proud of my work. Thank you for giving me a second chance." The most remarkable transformation had taken place between Daniel and James Morrison. The father and son, who had grown apart over social class issues, were now working together to expand the business. Daniel had officially taken over the management of a new division focused on independent mechanics and small family-owned repair shops. "You know," Morrison told Camila during a routine visit, "my son has taught me more about leadership in the last 6 months than I've learned in 30 years in business, and it started with your courage to help a stranger." Meanwhile, Fernando faced a completely different reality. Fired without references, with labor lawsuits pending and his reputation destroyed on social media after a video of the confrontation leaked, he had been forced to accept a job as a junior mechanic at a small workshop in the suburbs. Ironically, he now worked under the supervision of a young black man who did not tolerate discriminatory comments. Fernando, his new boss, had said on his first day, "Everyone here is equal. If you can't work with that, the door is open." Ricardo, who had been a silent accomplice to the discrimination, tried to find work at other garages in the area, but found that Morrison's network of contacts was extensive and efficient. No one wanted to hire someone associated with the discriminatory practices of the former management. Camila's workshop became a case study in business schools. Students visited regularly to understand how leadership based on respect and competence could transform not only financial results, but the entire organizational culture. "The secret," Camila explained to the students, "is not just hiring different people. It's creating an environment where difference is seen as strength, not as a problem." During an interview with a management magazine, Camila reflected on her journey. "When Fernando fired me, he thought he was punishing me. In fact, he freed me from a system that would never give me the recognition I deserved." Daniel's young daughter, now fully recovered, occasionally visited the workshop. She had adopted Camila as an aunt, always asking when she could fix cars like Aunt Camila. Morrison had set up a scholarship fund in the girl's name, specifically for young people from disadvantaged communities interested in auto mechanics. "Daddy," the girl said during one of these visits, "why didn't people help you when your motorcycle broke down?" Daniel looked at Camila before answering. "Because they judged by appearances, not by the heart. But Aunt Camila is different. She sees people for who they really are." On the first anniversary of the new management, Camila organized a party at the workshop. Old and new customers, employees, family members, and even some competitors were in attendance. Morrison gave an emotional speech about how a simple choice to do the right thing had transformed not just a company but several lives. "A year ago," Morrison said into the microphone, "my company almost partnered with someone who represented everything we despise. Today, I work with someone who represents everything we admire." Dona Rosa, Camila's mother, watched proudly from the front row. "Daughter," she whispered later, "remember when I told you that people like us have to be 3 times better? You've proven that when we're better, we change the whole game." Camila's story inspired other business owners in the region to review their hiring and management practices. 3 new workshops adopted similar inclusion policies, creating a ripple effect that transformed the local auto industry. Fernando, now working quietly in his new position, occasionally saw news stories about the success of the former employee he had fired. In moments of quiet reflection, he began to understand the magnitude of what he had lost because of prejudices he now recognized as foolish and destructive. The best revenge, Camila often said in leadership talks, is not to destroy those who hurt you. It's to build something so extraordinary that they realize exactly what they lost by underestimating you. Today, as she watches her team working in harmony, repairing cars for customers who trust her blindly, Camila smiles as she remembers the day she was fired for doing the right thing. Fernando tried to destroy her, but he ended up creating the perfect conditions for her to discover her true strength. The workshop wasn't just a thriving business. It was living proof that justice isn't just a pretty word, but a transformative force that, when applied correctly, benefits not only those seeking redress, but the entire society around them. If this story of overcoming adversity and justice touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories that prove that sometimes the biggest obstacles are just opportunities in disguise, waiting to reveal what we are truly capable of when we refuse to accept injustice as our destiny. Okay,